Hello everybody and welcome to the 67th edition of the Frank and Stan chat, and as you can see it's Frank and Stan. There are no guests this week. Have a big guest coming next week, but it's just as we're at the start of the academic year and there has been so much going on, to be honest, it felt right that it should just be the two of us to try and get through in half an hour. I try and cover just skim the surface of some of the issues that have been happening in the last week. But anyway, good morning to you, Stan.
Good morning, Frank.
Yeah,
it's been an interesting week, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I think we are. A number of schools have started back. We're sort of. It's the 3rd of September, and but most schools I think are starting back next week. But there are some that have started, and of course schools in Leicester and whatever have been back, and in Scotland been back for a couple of weeks and whatever. So we're aware that, but the majority are going back next week. So anyway, so I suppose this is our going back to school edition.
A welcome back.
Yeah, well,
with everything sorted.
Yes, yes. Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
I think people have referred to it as a car crash interview. I think it's a multiple pile up on the motorway interview. It's
when nobody's hurt.
No.
Just reputations are damaged.
Yeah, you can see the cars that aren't slowing down that are going to run in the back of it over and over again. Somebody once described a similar interview as a train crash, in that you can see it coming from a long way away, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. And this, of course, is the interview, or several interviews, that Gavin Williamson gave yesterday. Against, I have to say, a cynical view that he was rolled out in order to make the RAB interviews look okay. But what it was a lesson in an incompetent way to handle an issue. And I've actually written down exactly what we said. Now, I did some media training some years ago, and what they said at that point is that on average you get 10 seconds on air to say what you need to say. So what you need to have in your head is how you're going to use that 10 seconds. So this piece I'm going to read now is 17 seconds of the reply to "Have they got the monitors yet?" This is the reply. And of course, it's a whole sort of, we have to take that balanced approach. We're having to look at, whether it's the Delta variant or an earlier variant. It's how we're reducing the link between COVID and hospitalization, and the fact that we have this rollout of the program means we can take a different approach to the school.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
It doesn't actually mean anything.
What it means is we haven't got the monitors.
No. So the answer to the question was no, but we're hoping to get them as quickly as we can.
Yes.
And I think we've said before, it's not an easy time for ministers. It's not an easy time for schools, but there are ways of saying things. I mean, this is clearly, they've been briefed to say get a number of phrases in. Yeah. Balanced approach is one. Obviously, the vaccine rollout, you've got to get in as many times as you possibly can. Reducing the link between COVID and hospitalization, which is nothing to do with what we're doing in schools. And of course, this all came about around an unventilated room, that his answer was, just because it doesn't have ventilation doesn't mean to say it's not got ventilation.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, though, is that this is, we always try and bring this back to a school setting, don't we? But this is like how that staff room are us, the education profession, when your head teacher has just had an awful interview, on local radio or on television, and what is going on? What confidence does that inspire in the system, within that staff room, that actually your head teacher is on it, that you've got the confidence that they know what they're doing.
It reminded me of an interview when somebody's interviewing for a job above the station they're capable of, and they've read something, and at the interview, at the question, they spiel out these answers, and when you stop and say, "Well, tell me what that actually means,"
yes,
they fall apart because
yeah,
it's just.
But this goes back, though, Stan, doesn't it, to they're not sort of looking at there's not that sense of there's a sense they want to be definite. And what happened when they decided that the monitors were going to be purchased, the announcement on that was, hurrah, the monitors, you're all going to have monitors. And either the media have chosen not to stress the fact that this is probably not all schools are going to have them till January or whenever it is, but actually that should have been the key message at that time, and actually if there was then this sense of confidence in the individual, I think there would be a little bit of slack given about, right, you've made that decision, we all understand that those monitors cannot be purchased today. Well, they can be purchased today. Yeah, but I suspect everybody in the world's wanting these monitors now. And there'll be then questions asked about, well, who's producing the monitors? And that's then, and where are you procuring them from? Which is probably an area they might not want to go down, because it might be that they're not being made in the UK, so. Yeah.
And the next question for me will be, and how many per school?
Yeah, because they've not
only got one.
Yes, well, they've not been clear on that at all, have they?
And nobody's questioned them on it either.
No. I mean, in a way, the point you made, I think it was before we started recording, that actually it's a debate. It's a difficult decision as to whether or not that interview was as bad as Dominic Raab's interview at the Select Committee over Afghanistan, and the refusal to be clear about the date that he went on holiday. I have no problem in somebody wanting to keep their private life, their family life, to themselves. That's entirely right, but actually there comes a point though when your position of seniority is so significant, of national importance, that actually making that information available is actually very helpful. And I think most of us would say, well, I'm sorry, I went on holiday, accepting that, let's accept that he made a mistake. He shouldn't have gone. What would have helped would have been very clear about, well, when did you go? I cannot understand. There's something, isn't there, that is just causing more suspicion about when did he go. And I suspect somebody is going to reveal that. Somebody knows. If that is very embarrassing, that's going to come out. It might not come out today, it might not come out next week, but that will definitely come out.
It has to be something that's embarrassing, and I think it will be clear that he went on went to holiday at after there was the risk was raised, or the flags were raised to say, actually, this might be faster than we thought.
But actually, though, that report, though, I mean, this has all fallen apart now, isn't it? Because it was at the 22nd of July.
Yeah.
We know one of the most embarrassing parts of that interview was this, the chair asking, reading off in the same way that you have, and he asking, well, where did that come from? And it was, what's your own risk monitoring report? And the way that I thought it was interesting, the way that the Secretary of State went to his file, to sort of look for, whenever he was under pressure, he went into his file. That was a sort of like a way of just giving him a little bit of time to think, well, how the hell am I going to get out of this one? Now, the point, the reason I raised the Raab issue is not an education issue, but it's about being straight with people.
Yeah.
It's about being honest. It's about accepting that, yes, we don't expect every decision to be perfect and to be right, but actually, and we will give you a bit of slack if you are actually honest with us. We all understand the circumstances, we've spoken so many times about this, Stan.
No, it's just be straight. Be straight, be authentic, be honest. If there are things that the public maybe shouldn't know, then make sure you're clear about that. And even if you get to the point of saying, well, there are certain facts I can't share with you at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, we usually try and bring this back to a schoolish. I think this is the interview with Williamson is a good sort of touchstone for interviewing staff when governors are completely blown away by this technical gibberish that comes out from some candidates, to actually stop them and say, just tell me exactly what you mean. I mean, if you, I'm sure if I did the rest of that interview, that was only 17 seconds that I wrote out. If you did the rest of it, I'm sure you would repeat those lines time and time again, because whatever the question was, it was the rollout of the vaccines and the getting this balanced balanced way of dealing with the risks.
Yes.
And getting children back to a normal classroom. You know, I think there's, before you go in, here's 10 phrases that you must try and get across in this interview, regardless of the question. And I know the technique. I know the technique is to say that's a really good question, but more importantly, and then say what you want to say.
Or
but that was just,
or that's a good question. Or that's a good question. I dislike it when they say, but the truth is, no, that's your version of the truth. That's not the truth. That's just what you think the truth is. I really dislike that. I mean, I think the thing
on the select committee, they're quite good at going, no, you've answered the question you wanted me to ask.
Yes.
And not the question I actually asked.
But going to interviews then, Stan, though, isn't it the candidates that can make everything? I mean, there is a risk here, but it seems very simple.
Yeah.
Most things, when they're boiled down to it, seem very simple. You know, the simplicity of the Williamson, you know, if that was an interview, is probably would have said, we probably should have ordered these monitors earlier. We didn't. That, you know, I take personal responsibility for that, but we've ordered them now, and we're doing everything we can to get those monitors into schools, and we're going to make sure they've got enough.
Yeah,
you don't have to say how many that is, because it's going to differ from one school to the next. But there's that.
My interview then, my follow-up question would be, and when these monitors then trigger,
what are you going to do about it?
What we do next?
I said that I'm trying to defend the individual, but actually, you know what I mean? There's just something in the way that you just make that story more, you know, straightforward. And I think candidates that, I mean, there's a few phrases going around in education at the moment. I mean, one is metacognition. And, you know, there will be candidates using that phrase quite a lot, I suspect, in interviews. And most governors going, I have absolutely, to themselves, I've absolutely no idea what you're talking about. But embarrassed to say that, as if they ought to know what it is. And actually, I think that
critical knowledge is another one that's
But those are phrases that need to be unwrapped, you know, and actually made clear to by candidates about what it is they're actually talking about. And I think it's those sorts of people that I prefer working with, to be honest. You know, I mean, you want a level of expertise, but you want a level of understanding, you know, being able to convey it.
I think it's, I won't quote, I don't know the full quote from, I think Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old child, you don't understand it yourself.
Yeah. Well, what's caught my eye? Well, I mean, I'm going through a long list here. Okay, I'm going to raise this because, and I'm not going to name anybody in this, but I saw a message about somebody who's moved to another school, and it was a little bit critical, really, of the previous school that they'd worked in, and it made me think about, you know, that whole situation. Made me reflect on, you know, people I've worked with, places I've been to. I mean, Ofsted's a good one. I'm very critical of Ofsted now, not of the Ofsted I was part of. You know, I'm not slagging off the people that I actually worked with at that time, but actually there is I think it's probably right that if you're in a position of leadership in a particular school and you go to a new school, it's probably not a good idea to be critical of the leadership of the previous school, because in effect you're being critical of yourself.
Yeah.
And so in a way I was thinking about, because this is about work in general, isn't it? About, well, I've got a great new job, it's so much better than my last one, they do this so well. Well, just saying they do that so well, actually, without criticizing the other place, you're criticizing it, aren't you, by the fact you haven't referenced it. So for me, that's what's caught my eye this week. And
I think naturally, Frank, I used to say when people said, do you still keep in contact, do you still, and I always used to say, I always want the organizations I've worked with to continue to do well, but perhaps not quite as well as they were when I was there.
But I think that's important, though. I mean, leaders of whatever level, and let's face it, in most schools, teachers have leadership responsibilities. Actually, you've got to understand that if you're critical of the school schools you have worked in, because you've suddenly found a new school that you enjoy more, actually, if you're a leader, then actually you've got to take some responsibility for the fact that it wasn't the way that it was. I'm not suggesting that everything's down to you, therefore you should take the whole responsibility, but they've got to understand that they're part of the solution, and part of the outcome is down to their efforts. So anyway, so that's what's caught my eye. It sort of made me a bit disappointed, really, because I thought it's not about a secret club. You've worked in this place, and therefore you've got to value everything within it. I appreciate that that's impossible, but I think that there is something about being more guarded, I think, because you don't know who you're offending, who you're hurting. Okay, so that's what caught my eye this week. I mean, I wondered if it's worth just talking about the national tutoring program. And I saw a list when last year, when the list came out of the providers, I was critical of it because there were not many in the Northwest, and those that were located in the Northwest, actually a lot of schools had already used them. Some of them found them very helpful, some of them not. So there was not really much choice. And so the thing for me is always about locality. It's probably, if you can find the solution locally, I think that's better than it being imposed nationally. That's basically my view. So I went through all that list, and I was critical of DFE because I don't think they gave much regard to that. So this year I was particularly interested when I saw this week that a list of new providers of this year, the Randstad list. And I noticed that some of the big providers that had been on last year's list were no longer on the list. And the list the announcement didn't make clear that this was not the complete list. So I then started digging around and noticed that I think it was a Schools Week story indicating that the current providers were in contractual dispute with the DFE over the new contract with Randstad. So actually the list that there is out that's been issued, which also includes Randstad. Wow. Can you believe that? Can you believe that, Stan? So, I mean, that is such an own goal. But anyway, that list that is currently out there is not the full list. And the issue then is around there was an announcement about a desire to try and get more TAs trained up to be tutors, and well, not necessarily TA, but I suppose local employed people. And the schools don't know how much money they're going to get yet. And the announcement made clear that program will start in November. So clearly, nobody can really do much. Because A, we don't know what's happening with the current providers. B, we don't quite know yet how much money we've got for all of the new providers. C, we can't start some of the programs until November. So clearly this sort of learning loss, which is this, I don't like that phrase, but that's the sort of thing that they're talking about. These children need support. Can't do anything until probably January. By the time, let's face it, by the time you've got those people trained up in November, you're then into December. It's going to be a right mess, isn't it?
Yeah. And from what I was looking at, if you sort of train your own staff, they'll get paid £18, or the school get £18 an hour for those. But if they're external tutors, it's £50 an hour. So I'm not sure how that works.
No, I mean, there will be some schools that got their heads around all of this, and well done. If you have, can you write a piece in the TES or Schools Week to tell us how you've done it? Because the head teachers that I'm speaking to are in a fog really over this, and actually, I suspect that what's happening is they're waiting for the comprehensive spending review in the autumn, and they can then wrap this up. That's where these delays are occurring, because actually they've not got the money yet for all of this, or they're trying to delay because they haven't got all the money. So yeah, I feel as though we are in a really poor place.
Or if you delay it, Frank, an old trick is to delay it, and then actually not all of it gets spent within the financial year. Although you said yes, it's going to be from September 21. Actually, the main costs of it will come in the financial year 22-23.
Yeah. I mean, it feels just again, ill-conceived, not planned well. I mean, just here we are. Gosh,
not transparent.
No,
transparent.
Well, here we are. I mean, the term has started. Some schools in some parts of the country are already back. And here we are. They will be 2 or 3 weeks in, and they've just found out who's going to be on the list. And actually, there is still now this delay. So, I just feel as though there is just not this urgency that you would expect to see, and this sort of desire. It goes back to the monitors, isn't it? Everything is overpromised. Everything is underdelivered. Everything is late. Everything's not really thought through. And
I'm not surprised by this, but I do read naive views of schools. There was somebody on Twitter yesterday saying, well, I'm a designer for classrooms. I've never designed a classroom without windows or without ventilation. Well, of course you haven't. It wouldn't get through planning,
no.
building regs. But if you were in a school where you've got to make use of every space, some of those spaces that were meant for
for storing tables, PE equipment.
Yeah, all those have become teaching areas. May not be a classroom as such, but certainly many schools I go into have what would have been resource areas now as teaching areas or withdrawal areas. So there are people teaching in rooms with no windows.
Yes.
And it's not even uncommon, that, I don't think.
No.
So there's a naivety to think, and the question's still not been answered as to, what do you do if the CO2 monitor, because, there's no problem with having classes outside.
No, I think there's a bit of rowing back on that, but there was a bit of rowing back on that, wasn't there? But actually the rowing back then meant, well, what do you do if you can't put them outside?
Because he wouldn't criticise the decision, would he, or the guidance? He would neither support nor dispute the guidance. But that's not good enough to say, well, yes, you can open all the windows or you can take classes outside. It sounds like, for some people there's the solution then.
Yeah.
Every class, all day, every day through November.
I mean, it could all unravel this, couldn't it? Because Scotland are seeing a surge now, aren't they, in their infection rates within schools, and their secondary school students are expected to wear, in most situations, to wear masks. And actually, in a way, that would probably be the first port of call that the government will have to resort to. And I was it me that saw that in the southwest, that secondary school pupils were being encouraged to wear masks, as if to say we're going back to this sort of like regional response to the infection. When actually I think that, personally, I would have secondary school kids wearing masks and teachers, purely because of the fact that it's mitigating the risk. And I know there are all these issues about, I can't quite hear the teacher or whatever, but actually I prefer the children to be able to stay in school longer. And I think there's a risk now that they won't. But you know, who knows? I hope what the government is doing and all the schools are doing works, because obviously we do need the children back in the classroom.
We want children in the classroom. We want children able to mix with their friends, and we also, I think, want to make sure that we use this opportunity to look at what's the most important part of school.
Yes.
Might not be, surprise, surprise, critical knowledge.
Yeah.
There might be other things that are more important to pupils' development than cramming them with a way of memorizing some knowledge.
It's interesting you should say that, because tomorrow there's going to be an article in the Times about Blackpool, and you know, I'm quite heavily involved in Blackpool now, but it's talking about the fibre optic, what's something called the Atlantic Loop cable, which basically is a fibre optic cable from the States, which has landed in Blackpool and is actually going to be sort of, it's being buried across the UK over to, and then across to Denmark or somewhere. But that's a fantastic opportunity for the development of cloud storage in Blackpool, you know, and it's fantastic that there's this opportunity to develop that sort of digital awareness. The thing is that when you know, as part of the work, the interview with Blackpool, the Times education editor spoke to a number of digital businesses about what sort of knowledge and skills did you need in order to develop, though, you know, a digitally bright and aware workforce. And unfortunately for the government, you know, they were looking for they wanted, no doubt they need some element of coding skill, which is what the GCSE computer science is heavy on. But also what they wanted were young people who were very creative, people that could have the ability to show that they can work collaboratively and cooperatively, people that were able to come up with new ideas, people that were able to think in a clear way and able to message, you know, stuff very clearly, and to be very sort of responsive. Unfortunately, the computer science GCSE doesn't do that. You know, and so in a way, what was really helpful for me, because this is a significant weakness, I think, is that businesses were telling the Times, this is the problem, not me. And actually, I think because we're so wedded to that, sit in a hall, we need an exam, it's got to be rigorous. You know, there's a limit to what you can do to test out, you know, that young person's suitability for work in a digital environment. You know, and an exam will do just part of it, and actually what it's not doing is highlighting all the other parts, which is what really those digital businesses were asking for. So, you know, even if that's just speaking and listening, you know, that, you know, folks, if you're not an educationalist, this government does not test the children's ability to speak and to listen. Isn't that shameful? So then you can understand why actually businesses are then saying, well, actually, they haven't got the skills that we need. So we're not developing their full range of digital skills. We're not encouraging, we're not valuing, because we're not assessing it, we're not testing it, their ability to speak and to listen and to put forward an argument. That's not part of it anymore, folks. No. You know, but what we've got and what we're trying to get back to is rigor. That word rigor, you know.
We can analyse frontal adverbials.
Well, you know, and you think, hang on a minute, you know, and young people, when you speak to young people, they're expecting an assessment system, I think, that actually is more rounded than the one that they're in the machine. They're in a machine, and that's what you're going to do, folks. Yeah, I know it doesn't cover all these other things, but actually there's ways of cheating, or the ways of making that very flaky. What we want to do is put you in a room and get back to where we were before, because we know then that even though it's very, very limited, we know where we are. And actually, I think we should just widen it out. I think young people deserve that. Businesses deserve that.
An exam can be in part of it.
So yes, absolutely. I don't disagree.
You know, for those students who relish that and do well in those situations, show their strengths.
Yeah.
But there are a significant proportion who do not do well in that, and do not therefore show their capabilities to someone who wants to know how good they are at various things.
So that article tomorrow in the Times, I'm interested to read it, because I have no idea what it's going to say. But what I think, if there is any comeback on it, I think I'm really pleased to be able to be in a position to say, well, I'm really sorry. You might not agree with what I said, but I can put you in front of a number of digital businesses who would say exactly the same, because I'm not making this up. You know, so for me, you know, that bit around skill development, you know, we've got ourselves, the government's pushing everybody down the knowledge area. There's absolutely no doubt that knowledge is important, but actually, you know, they're throwing the skill bit as a post-16 sort of work-based type issue and not valuing it enough earlier on, you know, as if to say, well, we'll stuff them full of the knowledge, and then actually what we'll try and do is we'll give them the skills then, you know, once they've got the knowledge. And actually, you know, good education is knowledge, skills, understanding, you know, somewhere around behaviors and, you know,
understanding and experience. For me, trying to find the word experience in this, and in curriculum plans. No, we're going to teach this, this, and this, but how are the children going to learn? Is it going to be a classroom thing? Is it going to be a topic approach? Is it going to be going outside and seeing these things? I mean, you'll remember, right, a long time ago now, when we inspected a school in Cumbria, and there was a question mark over whether they were doing geography particularly well, and we found that they'd done, you know, like most schools had done, the sort of story of a stream.
Yes,
they'd actually been out and looked at a spring and a fast flowing stream and an oxbow lake, and they understood it. It wasn't that there wasn't piles of textbook written stuff in their books, but if you asked them about it, they actually understood it.
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Well, so anyway, I'm a bit anxious about that article tomorrow, but we'll see where we go.
Well, I've just realised we must have got through the best part of half an hour now.
More than that. I
think we've not mentioned Michael Gove dancing in a nightclub while the world is in turmoil.
Well, it's funny because
nobody's connected that. Jeremy Vine did a whole thing about, you know, should you be going to a club in it when you're in your 50s and 60s, and that was the theme. Not should someone who's got a really important place in the government be out of his tree in a nightclub as Kabul falls. You know, nobody seems to have questioned that.
I know. Somebody put that into they connected the Trainspotting film with that. They wove it together, which was scary. It was also interesting that it was at the University of Oxford where Michael Gove attended. You know, was it somebody there was saying, I think at a public meeting, that actually it was crazy to say that we don't trust experts, because basically his former university is based on trying to create experts, you know, and actually, you know, that in a way they were a bit ashamed that he was a former student there. But I mean, in some people said that they felt sorry for him. I mean, if you know, if his marriage has ended, he's working that through. I think they've got children and all that. You know, there is some excuse for sort of wanting to let your hair down and not perhaps being in quite the place you ought to be.
I'm all for that, Frank, but then resign from your most important job in government and give yourself time to do those things. You know, remember, there used to be people who genuinely resigned for family reasons.
Yes.
Now we've got a whole bunch of people who I mean,
well, nobody resigns, do they?
They don't resign, and you know, the idea of the Conservative Party with family values is.
I know, and also just going back. I mean, working with business. I mean, I'm struggling. I really am struggling to see it at the moment. Okay. Do you know what? We started at about 9:46, so that's a slightly longer one than normal, but it's probably the fact that, you know, it's just, I've only got through about a third of my list. But next week we have Fiona Miller with us, so that'll be a really fascinating, you know, discussion with Fiona to see what she brings to it, and who knows what we'll be talking about, because no doubt there'll be another list of things that I can only get a third down.
You can't even predict now, can you?
No.
There was a time, I remember a long time ago, new head teachers saying to me, you know, can you put us a timetable together of the year of what things we should be doing, when we should be planning them, and what's likely to and it took a lot of time, but we did work out eventually a year-long process that, no, you can't even do that for next week.
I know. I mean, in a way, it's remarkable that everyone has kept going, and you know, I still see lots of teachers trying to be as creative as possible, and you know, trying to find solutions, and
school leaders that are managing in a complete fog, and doing a great job of it, a really great job of it.
I think the worry is, though, that some of the leaders I've spoken to think it's going to be better.
Yeah,
you know, I can get on with the teaching, the learning, but actually,
well,
I hope they don't feel disappointed if they can't.
I was talking to a group of heads that have only been appointed in the last 18 months. And I was trying to say to them, you haven't had an opportunity to lead yet. You've really only managed for 18 months. So when the leadership pressure starts to come, things will change, and you'll need to be on your toes to recognize that you know, I'm no longer being told what to do nationally or locally. This is now, you know, what kind of school do I want to lead, and what do I need to do to get there? And, you know, my worry is that for newly appointed teachers, they've not necessarily going to have the right support to become leaders or to continue their leadership, because 2 years of it's almost like scaffolded managed stuff that's really difficult and really challenging might just have done something to their skill set.
Yeah, and also it's not as if you're switching, you know, the light bulb, the light on, are you? It's not as if, right, I've stopped managing now, I'm on to the leadership. You know, no. I mean, you know, it's just really, it's like a recipe, isn't it? You use leadership and management. It's just that at the moment you're throwing a lot more management into it.
Well, actually, I have a thing, and somebody picked up on it, which was, you know, we talk about leadership versus management, and leadership skills and management skills, and which is more sexy, leadership on, but in actual fact, it's the same person.
Yes.
In most cases, it's the same person.
Yeah.
It's not somebody different.
No. Okay, well, interesting. I think I'm sorry, it's been slightly longer than we would normally have. And I hope you found it interesting listening to Stan and I chatting about what's just happened in 1 week. I mean, anyway, so we have, as I say, Fiona next week. Then I think we have a gap because one of our guests has been unable to make it. So we'll probably get back with us the following, and then we have a series of a run of about 10 weeks where we have a guest every week. And so I'm really looking forward to that, because I have to say, it's interesting. Some of the guests get phenomenal viewing figures. And last week, actually, Stan, the week 2 weeks ago, when it was just you and I, we did really well with our viewing figures. But generally, the viewing figures are better when we have a top quality guest. And I suspect next week we'll go through the roof with the numbers. So, but we have got some great guests coming, and some returning, which I think is going to be interesting.
That'll be good.
One thing, I think Isha Asim, you know, the student that we saw, who is at Manchester Met, she was due to join us, but she was unable to do it. But I'm really interested to see what, you know, her experiences have been, because hopefully she'll be back. She will actually be in university now this term, and we can get a sense of how she's coping with it. But she's still battling away, and still, you know, she's still that sort of political leader of students and young people. But I'm looking forward to talking to Isha. Okay, so we'll see you all soon. I hope you have a good week, everyone. Take care.
Bye.